Okay, so I know you're not all back in your seats. That's fine. You can be any place you like. Thank you for coming back. We have a really fun session now. Of course, you know, one of the reasons you do these crazy conferences is people meet people. Med has been wanting to get Mary Helen introduced to us for a long time, and so that was that. This is a similar session. Where is she? I was going to say we have two Canadians, but it's not quite true. She's Canadian. Meta's going to introduce Kim, but Kim and Michael are both. Michael's a real Canadian. Kim's a person who's lived in BC for 30 years, but is an American now living back in Chicago. But they hadn't met each other. So while their work is very, very different, again, one of the reasons for doing these conferences is these connections that occur. Meta, would you like to say a few words to introduce Kim?
Yes. Do you need a microphone?
Yeah, you're not the mic one, which is good. Now I can swear in peace. So welcome, Kim. It is an incredible pleasure seeing you in person for the first time in what feels like millennia, but you are such an inspiration to us all, and you model everything you do, and that to me is much, much more intriguing and important and real than all the other stuff, which is also really important. The first time I met you was Mark Greenberg introduced you, and he said, "Oh, this is Kim Schonert Reichl. She's the mother of social emotional learning." And I was like, "Oh, that's an interesting way of introducing someone." And it came to mind as I was, now introducing you. Kim, you are an incredible partner, and the diligence you have with the work that you're invested in of bringing some goodness into the world and some meaning into the world is just a really deep, deep source of inspiration. You've also been an incredible partner along the way. Kim is also like a science encyclopedia. So you basically ask her questions and she'll pop out the reference, which is really practical for people like me who are like, yeah, I read something about this somewhere. And then Kim says what it was and who did it, which is, that's a great side effect. Kim is at the board. She's our president of the Center for Systems Awareness and just a real friend and partner, reviewer for the master practitioners, and I'm honored and humbled by your work, and lovely, lovely, lovely to have you here today.
Thank you, my Meta. Thank you. Oh my God, I'm so excited to be here.
So now let me pause you.
Wait, you're gonna.
The way we're going to do the session is Kim is going to speak and then Michael's going to speak. So I'm going to introduce Michael briefly now. Also, then you can just hand it over to him and not interrupt, and then we'll just open it up for conversation. So Michael Fullen is somebody that, if you're in education, very few people in the world haven't heard of Michael Fullen. He's written a lot of books and he's had a lot of influence. And he's too, like Kim, has been a real friend and partner for a long time. We couldn't really have a session with a theme like we have here of how do we more deeply understand and get more serious about real systemness or system change, or now I will say transcendent thinking, without having Michael part of this. So again, the plan is really simple. Kim's going to talk for about 10-15 minutes and Michael will, then we'll just open it up. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Peter. Hi, everyone. Hi. Thank you. How are you feeling? I study social and emotional learning. So hope you're feeling well. Hope you're in a positive mood state, because we know when your brain is in a positive mood state, you're going to retain more information and be more engaged and even be more creative in your thinking. So hopefully you're all feeling energized to be a part of this. I am so deeply honored to be a part of this conference and to be able to be here. Last time they had it, the University of Illinois Chicago, where I'm a professor, actually had a strike. And so I was unable to travel or do anything. So I'm so excited to be here today. So my task, at least how I saw it, is I have been doing research in the field of social and emotional learning for over 3 decades. In fact, it wasn't even called social and emotional learning when I started. It was called social and emotional development in education. And I thought, just because I've been working in the compassionate systems world now for several years, that I would actually try and make an explicit and intentional connection between the two. Like, what is the way? And I decided to use navigating the intersection of SEL and compassionate systems, because I'm trying to use like a sort of systems thinking of transportation systems, you know, trying how do you have different roads and different ways and how you coordinate all that. So I'm going to talk first about what is systemic social and emotional learning. Have any of you ever heard of the term social and emotional learning? It's kind of a joke because I'm guessing most of you have. And then what is the intersection of SEL and compassionate systems? And then I'm going to talk about some future pathways. But before beginning, I want to just tell you a little bit about my pathway and why I've invested so many years of my life in this field, and isn't, you know, it's part of the inner work and trying to reflect on that. And I started off my career as a teacher. I was in elementary school. I did my degree in elementary education. I taught middle school, 7th and 8th grade French, actually, and then I taught in an alternative high school for kids who had been kicked out of the regular school system. And those are the kids who taught me everything. I talk about like learning in the trenches, how to be a good teacher. It's working with those kids, because they will tell you what's on their mind. And in fact, they won't come to school if they don't think it's worth learning. So after that, I decided that working with adolescents and teens was not challenging enough for me. So I then went and lived and worked in a school at the University of Chicago for children and adolescents who were hopeless cases. There were kids with severe emotional and behavioral disorders, many removed from their home. This was an innovative school started by Bruno Bettelheim, and I lived and worked there for 3.5 years in something we call a therapeutic milieu. And part of that work was really about inner work. And here I was in my mid-20s, and it was all about, because you cannot work with these kids unless you really know yourself. And so I had my own, would you believe they assigned my own social worker to me to just work with my own inner development. And, you know, what a gift, really. And I just remembered the two things I was told when I started working at this school, because it was really that innovative place. I love that Eric talked about that earlier, about like innovations. University of Chicago at that time was like, let's take in new things. And so Bettelheim came in and changed the whole idea of anti-mental institution. I was told two things. Find something you like about every child and always lead with compassion. Like, can you imagine? This was in the early 80s, that was the work that I had. So it really formed my trajectory and then led me to my decades of research in this area. And then there's this other guy, the Dalai Lama, who also, I know I shouldn't call him my guy, but no, he wouldn't mind, is over the last 2 decades, I've been in conversation with the Dalai Lama over a dozen times. And each time, it's him who has inspired me, not inspired me, but pretty much shook his finger saying, Kim, study compassion in education, education of the heart, do the science. And that really has shaped the work I'm doing that now goes to SEL and compassionate systems. And for when I lived in British Columbia for 30 years, I was at the University of British Columbia, and I worked closely with the BC, who are my friends from BC here? Yay, go BC. I worked closely with the Ministry of Education in BC to basically redo their entire education system, K-12, to embed social and personal competency within the system there. That gives you a bit of a thing, but of course, this is kind of how he was to me, like, you know, shaking his finger. It is vital that when educating our children's brains that we do not neglect to educate their hearts, a key element of which has to be the nurturing of our compassionate nature. And he says the nurturing of our compassionate nature because he really believes, and science now supports that, is that we are born with the capacity for compassion. It isn't like we're born aggressive and we have to tame children, that we actually have. And there's Felix Wernicken and others who've really shown, really young children already show altruism. So I'm going to start by just going a bit about systemic social and emotional learning for some of you who might not. I'll go through it quickly because I know many of you know what systemic social and emotional learning is. And I do want to make a caveat right now that social and emotional learning is a term that is not very popular in the US in some states right now. I just want to acknowledge that. And so we can call it something else. Let's make up a new term. Let's just call it something else. Helping children be resilient, helping children develop their well-being. We'll call it that. We don't have to call it SEL. I'm going to use it for this point, but I'm totally, like, it's all about the kids. We can call it potatoes. I don't know. I love this quote, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Some of you have probably seen it before. It's not like Einstein. It's not the Dalai Lama. It's actually Aristotle, So this idea of integrating social and emotional learning and compassion into education is not a new idea. But what is new, and this is what Mary Helen really brought to fore, is the idea of the neuroscience. We now know from neuroscience how educating the heart or learning about emotions is integral to learning. And so I think that that's so fascinating to me. We know SEL is a growing movement. I'm not going to go through the whole definitions. This is CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. It's their 5 competency framework. I will say I'm also on the board for CASEL and work closely with them. But essentially, social and emotional learning is about, developing positive identity, showing empathy and compassion, being able to persevere, being able to establish and maintain supportive relationships and make responsible decisions. We know there's a science now, decades of research that really show the benefits of social and emotional learning. They predict important outcomes. Social emotional skills in kindergarten, for example, predict whether or not you graduate from high school, earn a college degree, or find stable employment. We know that social emotional skills are malleable, and you'll see I have Mary Helen cited there because she's done so much of this great work in the area. We know that it rivals IQ in predicting educational attainment, and we also know that it leads to better health outcomes and longevity. That we know now that children, for example, there's some research that we did on adolescent volunteering who volunteered with younger children in a randomized controlled trial, that those 15-year-olds who volunteered with the little kids after school, not only increased their empathy, but they actually decreased their risk for cardiovascular disease just by volunteering. So I could tell you more. It's a fun study. We also know that SEL, there's a longitudinal study that looked at kids who had SEL programs in childhood compared to those who did not, and found that in adulthood, they're more likely to vote as adults and also more likely to volunteer in their community. We also know through several meta-analyses, but I'll mention the one from 2011, that students who were in SEL programs compared to those who were not, this is over 213 studies, that students in SEL programs not only increased in their kindness, decreased in their aggression and emotional distress, they also had achievement test scores that were 11 percentile higher than those who were not in programs. And we know it's spreading throughout the world. In fact, I was just at a conference yesterday in Washington, D.C. at the Inter-American Development Bank that actually is embedding social emotional skills in Latin America and the Caribbean. I was in Japan in October. They're also embedding SEL in their legislation. And many other countries are now making it part of their entire system. I work with the OECD, again, another organization working on that. So defining systemic SEL, there was a paper that came out a couple of years ago that was basically a systemic SEL, talking about it isn't just about a program with kids, that SEL has to be thinking about a system. And they talk, systemic SEL is an approach to creating equitable learning conditions that actively involve all pre-K to 12 grade students in learning and practicing social, emotional, and academic competencies. And they came up with a model. It's a bit confusing, where you basically have state, district, and school theories of action, the systemic school-wide SEL that involves homes and communities, schools, and classrooms, and then a range of student outcomes from all the way achievement and graduation and things like that. It is a systemic framework, and really talking about that. I really love this approach. I don't know if any of you have seen this on CASEL's website. They have 10 indicators of school-wide SEL, everywhere from sort of explicit SEL instruction to supportive adult relationships to things like supportive discipline. And I really love this idea of thinking about it holistically. And actually, I would really love to think about, well, what would happen when you do compassionate systems for all these things? Anyway. And I'd like to make it simple to just say when you talk about systemic and SEL, you just have to really think about the three dimensions: the students, the educators, and the learning context, the climate, the discipline, the school. And I will tell you, over the years, the last several years, and this is what draws me to compassionate systems awareness, I believe that the adult relationships are the lever. Adult mindsets, they are at the very core. And I would say it right now, I believe that we should pay much more attention to teachers and teacher preparation than we currently do. Okay, so what is the intersection of systemic social emotional learning? And I'm gonna watch my time, okay. What is the intersection of these two? The importance of compassion education. I don't know if any of you have seen this before. I think is the person. I saw you earlier. I'm like, I know you. I've used this slide so many times. So, yay! What's your name? Wait, what's your name? Hi, Tiffany. So, what are the ways that they're similar? We know that there's a shared focus on holistic development, an emphasis on empathy and compassion, alignment with an equity and inclusion, systemic implementation for sustainable change, and synergistic approaches to professional development. Those are ways, the intersection between SEL and compassionate systems. These are things they both share, they both have a focus on. But what are some of the factors, what are the value added of compassionate systems? And I want to just keep on saying, I'm hoping that I'm the advocate for making sure the SEL, now, I'm at Castle, that SEL and compassionate systems intersect, that they're really seen so integral, because I truly believe that compassionate systems is a value added to SEL. Does anybody else agree with me? Okay, good. Okay, what do? Systems thinking, embedding systems thinking into SEL practices, fostering organizational and systemic compassion, building emotional literacy beyond the individual, promoting equity through compassionate practices, strengthening relationships across hierarchies, aligning SEL with broader organizational goals, and encouraging long-term sustainability. That's what I believe by bringing compassionate systems intentionally into the field of social emotional learning, into school systems that focus on SEL, can really, I think, boost and escalate the outcomes for students and systems. Okay, so what are some future pathways? In the last few minutes I have, again, continuing, you see all the intersections and the roads and stuff like that. I first want to start with a caveat and just warn you, there's this amazing guy who many of us might have heard of before, Seymour Sarazen, who was called an optimistic curmudgeon at Yale University, but he wrote the book, like he did actually write the book, on the predictable failure of educational reform. And as we move to systems changing, we have to be really cognizant of what has come before us and how other educational system change has failed. So we really, the thing that I love that's so important is he says, to the extent that the effort on change identifies and meaningfully involves all those who directly or indirectly will be affected by the change, to that extent, the effort stands a chance to be successful. So we really have to think about who are all the members of the system and how do we bring them in inclusive, equitable ways. And I have to say, so I'm going to just end with the last couple of slides. Right now, I'm just saying this now. So some of these slides, I put together things I'm seeing. I believe we have a compassion revolution happening right now, and we need it now more than ever. And who's leading the charge? Where's my meta? Oh, who's leading the charge? Are you ready for a revolution? Okay. Just really about the idea of important compassionate systems. We have a number of articles that have emerged. To me, I've been really focused on, for the last 3 decades, on the promotion of positive human qualities, empathy and compassion. That's where I started my work. And to tell you the truth, at that time, there were no articles on compassion. In the last 5 years, there's been an increased number. There's this one by Rob and Blake and Mark on compassion and human development. There's been one on compassionate education from preschool to graduate school. We haven't yet talked about revolution in higher ed, I just have to say. Although I have to say, Suchicha is helping lead the charge there. We have one Mark Greenberg and Krista Turksma wrote about understanding water and the seeds of compassion. I won't go through all of this, but they really talk about their recommendations of what to do, recognizing and honoring differences, create learning contexts. Oh, and I just will say, I would be happy to, I'm looking at Lana, send all of these articles. You all want these articles? Okay, yes, I will send them. And now I've created a new term that we're going to start using: compassion-based social and emotional learning. So I feel like, compassionate systems, social emotional learning. So we really talk about the integral, evaluating the path to system-wide change and looking at outcomes, but at multiple levels. So I have, and Etta and I've kind of talked about this, any research study really needs to work from a cell to society model. I think we need to look at epigenetic change and like Mary Helen, neural changes, all the way up to community change, system, societal changes. And I bring this up, if some of you have ever heard of British Columbia, has been collecting data on child well-being. One of the measures is a population measure of middle child development that looks at empathy and compassion and well-being inside and outside of school. And for the first time, no one's ever seen these maps. So we created maps. That's what the MDI is known for, creating maps of how kids are doing at different communities across the province. Some of people have seen the maps before, I think. And here are some maps. So for example, we measure children's empathy at the population level. So every child in the school district completes the measures. And so you can map by community where there are higher to lower levels of empathy among the students, right? So you can see the darker colors are where there's higher empathy, the lighter colors are lower empathy. And we have this is for 7th grade students. You could see by community. But if we really want to look at system-wide change, you'd expect that if you're embedding system level approaches, you should be able to see these changes at the system level. And we also have happiness is the other one, where you could actually look at different jurisdictions and see higher versus lower levels of happiness in there as well. Anyway, so it's looking all the way from the brain and the cell all the way up to the society. And then in closing, I'm just going to stop here. To really talk about, we have some of this revolution already happening. We have the Compassionate Schools Project, or Flourish, which has happened in Louisville, Kentucky, where the entire district, and led by the mayor, who actually rode on a platform of compassion and won. That is showing positive effects. And then finally, and Tyra Lynn, where's Tyra Lynn? There, she's over there, who's leading the work of C-Learning, which is social, emotional, and ethical learning, really showing, again, this focus on a compassion-based SEL program that really shows positive outcomes for kids. So I'm going to end there because I can't wait to hear what Michael has to say. And thank you, and looking forward to the conversation.